So, welcome to Unusual Attitudes, a captivating podcast where we explore the extraordinary lives of individuals, showcasing their unique stories and professional accomplishments and experiences. This particular series of podcasts with Unusual Attitudes is a focus on women of power and influence, which I couldn't think of a better person to have on the podcast than my friend Meredith. Meredith Wellard, who are you?
Who am I? Okay. Well, firstly, I'm this person here. I am apparently a talent management mastermind who is leading the charge, emotionally intelligent, and solving sticky situations. That's me. I'm also a mother and a very happy head of talent acquisition, learning and growth at my company DHL Group. I'm good.
You're many things. I think one of the things I find most interesting about your experience is the global nature of your experience. Not every individual gets that, let alone every woman gets that. That is through literal years of work and advancing in your various roles where you've been, giving you the opportunity to move around. What has it been like? I mean, you're Australian.
Yeah.
You live in Bonn, Germany.
Yeah.
Or let's just say you're splitting some time, right?
Yeah.
And you're here in the States quite a bit,
Yeah.
for travel. How has the travel piece, from a culture standpoint, how has that influenced your value system as an individual, as a woman, as an executive?
Yeah. So when I was about 21, I had a near-death experience. I actually had a cliff fall down on me. Not you, but a cliff. And I remember, as I thought I was actually about to die, looking up at the sky and thinking, I've had a good life, but I haven't traveled enough. I literally thought that. And it kind of then triggered me to immediately start this sort of world investigation, from the early days when I was just basically finished studied and just did that sort of post-study year abroad, to then deciding, I actually want to work and live overseas. I met my ex-husband overseas. I had my children back in Australia, but when they were very young, we moved to the Middle East and lived in Dubai. I always had this kind of it's not enough. I need to try something else. And so we moved from Dubai to Bahrain, from Bahrain to Germany. I looked after business, head of HR for Iraq, Afghanistan, and our military business. But it was always this kind of curiosity and intrigue that's kept me going. Interestingly, I think that first moment when I decided I needed to travel more is also why I like that you call me a woman of influence, but I think it's why I ended up with that nice title from you, because what you learn in moving around the world, in working with different cultures, in opening your mind to the fact that everyone comes from a different point of view and perspective, is that you're great. I know that I bring amazing things to the table, but I've also learned that so does everyone else. And together we can be super successful. It's not me against you, it's me with you. And I think that really came from my global travels. Yeah.
And so if you think about all the travel that you've done, all the roles that you had, in terms of your career path, what was the most significant thing? Clearly, the earth falling on you was a bit of an epiphany to say, get out into the world. But in terms specific to your career, what's one or two of the most influential moments in your life where you're you look back and you say, that's the moment I decided to do this or became this. You assumed a new identity at some point, right? So when did that happen for you?
So I have a lot of intrigue for new ideas and getting things done. So I love that whole sort of journey of saying, oh, what would be a really good idea? Let's do it, and then do it, and it's done and it's successful. At that moment in my career, I'm always ready for the next thing. And I think that's sort of been a definite pattern. I've also had some very interesting moments where I've had realizations about who I am as a person. So working in those war zones, for example, and recognizing that people that live and work in war zones they are, not worried about, which newspaper we get on the company-sponsored bus on the way into work. They are interested in, do I get to work alive? Do I get to have a meal at the end of the day? Or, so it's really a manifestation of work is life. And for me, that was a big sort of aha moment that's I'm in the place where I should be when I know I can make work safe for people, whether it's in a war zone or whether it's in, Germany corporate center. It needs to feel safe. Yeah.
How have you, and so it's sort of an interesting perspective because, we, I think, take for granted, especially in, we'll call it first world countries as the best way to describe it, all the things that are offered to us, all the opportunity, all the ability to move around and learn, access to information.
Absolutely.
In some of the places that you've worked, and let's speak about the women of the world, right? What is the real disadvantage? I think we're not where we need to be from an equity standpoint by a long shot. We have a long way to go. However, there's a lot more opportunity in sort of the first world in terms of advancing equity. What are the challenges in the non-first world parts of the country for women?
Yeah. It's quite interesting because I would agree that in the first world we have more awareness, and you and I can sit at a table like this and have an adult conversation without any barriers. I think, however, there are some very insidious traps in the first world that we've almost become oblivious to, and it's in small nuances and references, but I still believe it's very challenging for women in the first world as it is in other countries, right? The difference is in other countries it can be things like my husband won't let me work, right? So it's fundamental. If my husband doesn't let me work, then I don't work.
The door, it just stops there.
Exactly. Yeah. But mark my words, there are women in first world countries, women even I know, whose husband has not said to her, you may not work, but whose husband has made it so challenging to work that they can't work. So, and I'm not saying it happens all the time, and it's nuanced. Who's going to look after the kids?
It's sort of this, that's your responsibility. Yeah. It's inferred. I heard a story here at the conference just this morning about an individual woman who we wanted, to be able to come to the conference, and her response back was, my husband won't let me travel to Philadelphia.
Right.
And this is what you're talking about. It's, like, I don't trust you enough, and I'm not get into someone's personal relationship. But this is a huge barrier. Yeah. It's a huge barrier. Freedom of movement and freedom and trust and confidence. No one would say that to a man. Not in a million years would say you can't go to Philadelphia because of crime. Or some other excuse. Exactly. And this is the barrier that you're talking about. Even in first world countries, it is subtle. Yeah. It is almost hidden in a way. Yeah. How do we overcome that?
I think it's not... okay, my perspective may be a little bit against what a lot of people say. I think it is important that we have programs and initiatives that bring this stuff into the space where everyone can talk about it, for sure. I also think, though, that creates its own risk. If we say there is a problem and constantly refer to the problem, sometimes the problem doesn't go away, Maybe what we need to do is still do those things, right? Still talk about, women need to remove the glass ceiling and women need to have more. But let's also focus rather more on having diversity in general. Going back to my point about what I learned about traveling around the globe, about everyone has a strength, everyone has something to offer. Let us focus on that rather than targeting all the time specific audiences who are suffering. I really love the whole diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging concept, especially belonging, because when you belong, it doesn't matter who you are, and we don't need a program for you or you or you. You just belong, and you feel you belong, and I feel you belong, and then we're in a good place.
Yeah, I think the belonging piece is really big for me because going to school here in Philadelphia, a musician, there were no barriers. It was really, we looked at, what was your skill? What did you bring to the table? And there's a really good, Vernier Myers talks about this, being a part of a band or an orchestra,
Yeah.
and it is, you understand your part and you're trusted to play it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you look like or who you are. It's like, we value your skill, your commitment, and knowing the bigger picture that the show goes on, especially in an orchestra or a band, anyone that's in performing arts, we trust each other. And so those barriers come down. And in some ways, I wish corporate America acted more like an orchestra, but we're not there yet. And that's what I think that's kind of what we're fighting against.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I think, I suspect orchestras are probably not perfect either, but there is some nice messages about leadership that come through from an orchestra sort of metaphor, around that, we're only as weak as our weakest link. When we work together, we are more powerful. The idea that the conductor has every individual success in mind when they conduct. So, there's some nice metaphors there. I would agree, though. I think that if we can transition to an environment where leaders are enabling belonging and a sense of, I should be here because I add value under my own terms, then we're in a good space. I think I was very fortunate growing up that, maybe it was to do with my family upbringing, the fact I came from a family of girls. So, at least the male sort of father figures and so forth that I had, they were very interested in my success. And I never had a doubt. In fact, I don't think I've ever thought that I wasn't able to do. And I can remember learning about this glass ceiling at some point early in my career and thinking, really? Glass? I didn't really understand what it meant until sort of, I grew older and more senior but by then I was already on the trajectory. So, I think some of this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy can be a challenge for everyone, not just women.
You think in some way that, these perceptions, perceived or real, the ability, for and I'll just say the media, in general, not the media is a bad thing, but how we inject news and the opinions and the motivations of different organizations influence the way that we see ourselves.
Yeah.
How big of a challenge is that for women in general? Because you hear the DEI and B, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, which equality of opportunity, to me, I grew up this way, right? So I lived all over the country and a bit around the world. And, seeing that I think is really important. Experience it is really important. But that influence, let me describe it this way. When you walk into a room, you, Meredith, have walked into rooms that are predominantly male. Whether you were, an individual contributor, as an executive, whatever it may be, you will carry that with you inherently, and sometimes it's a personal unconscious bias.
Yeah.
How have you recognized that, in yourself and overcome it?
Yeah.
Because you clearly have a lot of influence and confidence now.
Yeah, but I have my moments. Actually, there was a speaker yesterday here at the conference that I was super impressed by a comment she made about being a black woman and walking into a room of white people and understanding that they may be scared. And I thought, that's a little bit what it is. It's that piece of saying, I know myself well enough to know that the only person whose behavior I can influence is my own. And I can't speak to how you're feeling about me coming into a room where you are. Now, maybe you're not scared of me, but maybe you feel superior to me. Maybe you feel more intelligent than me. And that's okay, because I know who I am. And, when you know who you are and you like yourself, I love my little heart. I love that I'm this person, And that's not about being arrogant or egotistical. That's just about saying, I know who I am and I actually really like who I am. And then you get that confidence and that sense of belonging. I could choose to walk out of a room if someone is rude to me or if someone insults me, and I would sometimes, and I do, have done, But what I don't do is assume that you are not a good person or you are going to put me under a threatful sort of situation just because I'm different.
I think that's important, because what you're talking about in my own definition, in my own life, I've contextualized this as I always trust someone else's experience. And I don't try to change it. I just accept it for what it is.
Yes.
And because I need to accept that in myself.
Yeah.
And when it's almost a freeing exercise, because you shed all these these layers of doubt and insecurity. Not all of them. We all have our insecurities, and I still have mine. But still, I think you create your own personal vulnerability. And if someone accepts that, you know they truly have your best interest. If they don't, it's a great barometer, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, when you are vulnerable and someone doesn't recognize it in some way, and you don't make that, because you feel when you're connected to someone. And when you don't, you're like, okay, I am not going to really connect with this person well. Maybe this isn't the right situation for me.
Yeah.
But recognizing that takes time.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something about influence, and I think it was really good. You know, a very, very simple question. Who has been your biggest influence?
It's a really nice question. I think I've had I've been quite fortunate to have had some lovely mentors. There was several women, usually older than me, as I've come up through my career, who I've admired. I've admired them for their success, but also for their ability to be who they are. So those people have been a big influence. But I think probably my biggest influence has actually been a leader that I had when I worked in the war zones, who was a gentleman who, he also very much, he was who he was. He was in a tough job. I mean, probably one of the toughest jobs you can be in, running that type of business, but incredibly fair, incredibly considerate to the front line person all the way up to the senior managers, thoughtful and just a genuine person. And I learned to be genuine through that,
So we talk a little bit about influence of the people, where do you aspire to be at this point in your life? What is next for Meredith?
More take over the world. No. I just want to be who I am. I just want to be happy, comfortable. I want to live my life without a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I want to be accepted and acknowledged, but not at a cost, just for being me, I mean, of course, I'd like to have lots of money and a nice car and a holiday house, and but that's all secondary. I think being you and being comfortable with you is actually the best gift that any of us can have, especially in this day and age when there is so much unhappiness in the world, so many people without joy, and I'm very lucky that I bring that to the table for myself. So.
Well, that almost sounds like advice. So let me ask the question. What is your advice to women either entering the professional workforce or trying to advance themselves in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah.
What is your advice to them?
Yeah. So I would say two big pieces of advice. Maybe they're not easy to do, but the first one is you are absolutely good enough. You are good enough, and you have to believe that before you do anything else. And the second thing is make sure when you choose to do whatever you're going to do that you're going towards something and not running away from something. And I think that's important, because if you spend your whole life running away from something, you never get that sense of, look what I've done, So I think believe in yourself and go towards something, not away from something.
Great. Meredith Wellard, thank you for sharing your unusual attitude.
No problem. My pleasure. Thanks.